to you when you look at the different steps, why they go in the order that they're in? Did you ever notice before that there is a certain order? I mean, we just kind of go to the meeting and they're just going, okay, now we're going to do, and then you know, you just kind of roll through it. But to realize that there is a purpose to the order of things. So, you know, you have to review assessment data. Everything is based on that. You have to develop the PLAF based on the data. Then the IEPs are based on the PLAF. And then determination of placement. All right, so let's look at this. Sometimes all the signs, take a look at those signs. Something is wrong with that, right? Sometimes all the signs are wrong, right? Even the most well-intentioned educators might sometimes not get it right, and that's okay. We're all human. But placement is supposed to be, hello, it's in the ARG process. It's supposed to be an ARG committee decision. Somebody mentioned earlier, I don't remember who it was, talking about predetermination of placement. Predetermination of placement by the school is big, huge no-no. Like the school attorney would actually say to them, you cannot do that. The ARG committee is supposed to decide this. Well, what is predetermination of placement? That would be like them saying, and this happens a lot, that student has Down syndrome, they have to go to life skills. That student has this, they have to go to this behavior class. That student has XYZ, they have to go here. That's predetermining placement that the school is deciding. Was the parent in on that decision? And is the parent right here number one? We're number one in the list of who's supposed to be in that ARG committee. So they're not supposed to predetermine placement. Did you notice that placement is determined after the entire program is developed? We just spent all that time developing the PLAF, developing the IEPs, determining what supports and services are needed. Then we determine where is the least restrictive place for those to take place and to be done. So what placement in the least restrictive environment best supports the IEP goals? And we've heard of least restrictive environment, but let's examine it for a minute. When we're looking at least restrictive, the very least restrictive place in the entire school is where? Regular classroom. General education classroom with typically developing peers. It is in the town, in the school, in the class, in the chair where they would be sitting if they didn't have a disability. That is the least restrictive place. What would be a most restrictive place? A self-contained, life skills, behavior, autism unit, whatever it is. Why? Because they're not with their non-disabled peers. So you start with the chair that they're supposed to be in if they didn't have a disability. That's where it's supposed to start. And then if that doesn't work with all the supports and services that they need, now that can include, okay, for math, they need to go to the resource class to get help for that. Or for reading, you know, whatever. Or they need to get in-class support to come in and support them in there, or whatever it is. So that is, can they get that in this chair? If the answer is yes, then that's the chair they need to be in. We start there, and then we put more restrictions. Are we going to have kids in a self-contained class? Yes, of course. But they should also have an opportunity to interact with their non-disabled peers.
And not just at lunchtime.
Not just at lunchtime.
Or PE. Yeah.
Right.
art.
Yeah.
So the school has to answer various questions when determining least restrictive. They have to answer, and we go through all of this with the assurances and stuff that they read. But does that placement have any potential harmful effects? You have to weigh the benefit and the harm that could come. Okay, so, if we put them in this placement, are there any potential harmful effects that are going to come from that? Well, we answer all of those questions. Is the stigmatization, can't say that, of having a disability, being in that classroom, that kind of stuff. That's what we have to weigh. Or does the benefit of being there outweigh that? Are there opportunities to participate in extracurricular activities? Do you know that they are supposed to provide supports in extracurricular activities also? It was amazing to me in elementary school. My son always had in-class support, where the support would come to him in the general education classroom in the form of a paraprofessional or the special ed teacher or whatever. And when he was very, very young, first, second grade, lots of sensory things, lots of sensory issues, just the executive functioning and not being able to control himself, not having learned those skills yet. And then we go to music or PE or art or the recess. And where does the paraprofessional go? On break. And where's the most stimulating part in the whole school, in those places? And when we have sensory issues, well, I'm sorry, what did we expect when, I get a call from the principal, well, he's in the office because he had a meltdown in art class. Well, if we're not going to provide support in that place where he needs it the most, really, as far as functioning again, then that's what we're going to end up getting. And I understand that paraprofessionals need breaks and stuff too, but if a student needs support in a certain area, then we need to provide that support.
Especially with children with autism spectrum disorders, the transitions are really hard.
Yeah.
And that's when they're away from their regular teachers that know them as well as their curricular routine.
Yeah. And that's why the autism supplement addresses minimal unstructured time. So that's it, because it's important, because that's just a part of the disability.
And I've even had, you wouldn't believe this, at an art meeting, the principal talked about the benefits of putting the child in an alternative school, how well they would do. I say, is that where you're putting your child because it's such a great education?
Thank you.
And unfortunately they do well, especially children with autism, because it's very structured.
Sure.
But he was trying to sell alternative school as the best placement for this child to be. I'm like, what? Have you lost your mind? We're not training him to be an inmate.
Thank you. We hope not, yes. What classes will the student attend with the regular education students? Even if they are in a self-contained classroom, they need to have time with non-disabled peers. And so that is also part of that least restrictive. So they're not supposed to predetermine the placement, and they have to consider all of these things. And does the benefit outweigh the risk of putting them in there?
I have one quick question.
Yes.
As far as the paraprofessional, like if they have inclusion in the classroom, do they have to be trained to be able to help the student? Or can the school legally just send them in there to help the student?
Now you're opening a whole new can of worms.
Yeah, because I request that all of them have autism training. Everyone, bus driver, cafeteria
Yeah.
ladies, everybody.
There's not a lot of training often for the paraprofessionals, which is insane because they're the ones that are doing most of the support for our students. Is there anything in the law about it? No.
Okay.
But that's the power of being on the art committee and saying, these people need to have some training,
Okay.
you know. Some districts are better at it than others.
Do you have more than one bus driver? I mean, my child rides the regular bus,
Yeah.
but there's the bus driver
And
and
the aide.
2 aides on our bus.
Well, there's only
It's a big,
three kids riding the
it's a
bus.
big bus.
No, ours is little, it's only 3 kids, so it's just the bus driver. But they both got training.
Well, and I had a friend who was she worked as a paraprofessional in Katy, and she also has a child with a disability. And so she already brought a lot of knowledge to the table with how to deal with kids with disabilities as a paraprofessional. But she was always complaining because they did not get training. Because they would have to pay them for training.
Right.
And not that I've ever done this, but my children have been under 504s. And if you file a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights and say, I want these people trained, they'll get trained. Not that I ever would do that, but they'll get training. They'll find the money
Yeah,
and get them trained.
somewhere.
And submit proof that they've been trained. Not that I'd ever do that. I mean,
Yes, ma'am.
Well, you can mention it. But there's free training online, and
Yeah.
that's part of the thing, it eats into their schedule and all that, but there is free training
Yes,
online.
yes.
I mean, it's better than nothing.
It is, yes. Well, yeah, and it's not necessarily going to cost the district to, because the region service center can even provide the training. But you're still going to have to probably pay that person their hourly wage or whatever to do it. And that's what they don't want to do, which is
Nobody wants.
crazy. Nobody wants to do that.
I don't know.
It's not only the paraprofessionals, I didn't say, but my degree is actually in elementary education, and for special needs, children, accommodation stuff, one class.
Yeah.
That's
I know.
all. And I graduated a certified teacher.
Me
In the
too.
classroom, supposed to know what I'm doing.
Yeah,
I didn't have a clue.
no. I know, it was 1 credit hour. It wasn't even 3 credit hours
I
in
think mine
college.
was more than one.
Mine was 1 at Texas Tech in 1980, whatever. I'm not gonna say, but you know, it was like, really? That's all we get? Yeah, but that's, back then, you know, special education was the place down the hall. It wasn't as much as it is now. I think they're doing a better job at it, but you're right, you know, paraprofessionals a lot don't get a lot of training, and they're the ones that are interacting most with our students.
They're reading the test to the students, or administering the test, and that's, you know.
Yep. Graduation is talked about. The art committee is the one, if a student has a disability, that determines when the student has met graduation requirements. We won't get into all of the, you know, I've already mentioned, there's all different graduation plans that are out there now, and a brand new one this year that everybody's trying to understand. But the art committee is an integral part of that graduation.
They will stay till 21, right, or is it 19?
They can stay through their 21st birthday, depending on when that falls. They can stay all the way until 22. Of course, the goal is to graduate in 4 years from high school, but if a student is not able to do that, then they can continue to get services beyond that. And so the art committee is going to help with determining that. Transition planning, this really takes place back in the IEP development and needs to be talked about all the way through the ARD, because once they're in the transition process, transition planning, and this is transition to adulthood, transition out of school, begins at the age of 14 in the state of Texas. Okay, IDEA mandates age 16, but that's not early enough. They're already in high school at 16. And now with the new graduation requirements where you have to declare sort of a track that you're taking in your plan, all 8th graders now are having to state what their endorsement is. And so transition planning starts taking place at age 14 with transition assessments and goals and all that kind of stuff. And we'll go into more detail on that on the Day 2 webinar, because I can show you kind of how the transition goals tie in to the regular IEP goals, because my son is in that stage. I can show that to you. But that takes that, you know, we'll talk more about that, but Transition planning is an important part once they reach age 14 and beyond that. Okay, so after we do all of those things, we've determined placement, where is the best place for them to receive those services that we put in place. The principal, or usually it's the administrator, will read the assurances, which is basically where they say, we're going to do what we say we're going to do in this plan. And that we have determined that this is not going to provide harm to the student and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of a script that they read to you. But we need to read the fine print. Caution, the sign has sharp edges. Do not touch the edges of the sign. And by the way, the bridge is out ahead in the smallest print, right? What is the most important part of that sign?
The bridge is out.
I wouldn't be able to see that.
So always read the fine print. They should also take detailed minutes. Now, we're getting ready to have a training that I've set up with our contacted TEA, who's going to do our other one. He's actually in the office of the complaints department. And I had gone to a training with him years ago at one of the conferences, Texas Parent to Parent, or one of those conferences, and contacted him because we were going to do these cooperative webinars. And then he said, hey, the new commissioner's rules came out January 1. Would you like us to do a training on those? Because there's some pretty big changes. It's like, yes, we do want you to do that so we can be up to speed. What happens is the legislature meets, they come up with new state laws, new rules and stuff, and then it takes 2 years for the Board of Ed and the commissioner, the Commissioner of Education to interpret what the legislature has done and put the new rules in place. So just now, okay, I don't know if y'all know, but the legislature goes into session every 2 years. They just started their new session, like last week, this week. So these rules are in place January 1 from 2 years ago that they implemented. And there is a significant portion in there about ARD minutes and parents having to sign, agree, or disagree. And I'm not going to explain all of it because I don't understand all of the implications of it yet until we have that training. But you're going to see some changes in your ARD this spring if you have a spring ARD. I think school districts, once the commissioner's rules come out, then TEA, the service centers do their trainings for the school system, the school districts and the administrators and stuff, and explain the implications of that, and then things, then it trickles down into the actual ARD meeting. So it's going to be a little while, but we're going to start seeing those changes to the new commissioner rules. You can go to the TEA website and see them. Yes, ma'am.
So the commissioner's rules are already out?
Yes, the new changes. January 1 they came out. They will be updating the legal framework, with those over the next couple months. But the one that really stuck out to me as not being so good for us as parents is the part about meeting minutes, and something about it says that a parent, there's not going to be that signature page where you agree or disagree anymore. It's going to have to be stated throughout, and the 10-day recess is not a hard, fast 10-day recess anymore if you disagree at the ARD. There can be a mutually agreed upon span of time. And I was like, really? I don't think that's good either. But so we'll see. So just know, it's always evolving and changing. They still have to be within the IDEA federal guidelines, but then we have state laws above and beyond. They can't do less. but they could do more. But they can also, there's some leeway in IDEA where they interpret things, which is why the timelines for initial ARDs changed also. And that was in the previous session, not the last one, but the one before that, where they changed the timeline from 60 calendar days to the 45 school days. IDEA says 60 calendar days, but it also says, or states can set their own timeline. And it's like, what? So, you know, they do that until somebody takes them to court and challenges it. So they can put these things in place until somebody challenges those things in a due process hearing. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, with regard to minutes and tape recordings, parents bring a tape recorder and they run the tape recorder back and see that, well, they don't sync up. You know, what happens then?
They don't sync up with what they.
What was on the tape recorder does not sync up with what is written in the minutes.
And, you know, should you tape record? Yes, I've tape recorded lots of ARDs for my son. Some say if you had to go to due process, that tape recording wouldn't be admissible, but if you tape the ARD, then the school also tapes it. You know, y'all have been there. So there must be some weight to it. But it's good to go back and say, you know, when they read the minutes of the meeting, which should be detailed minutes, we have to pay attention when they're reading those and amend them as needed at the ARD. Our school district was really interesting because we came from, you know, a very large school district in Katy. So what I was used to all the way through elementary school for my son was the diagnostician was the one that ran the meeting and did all the paperwork for the ARD and everything. And then usually it was the assistant principal, the administrator, or it could have been the special ed teacher. Somebody was also there with their laptop taking the minutes of the meeting. Detailed, very detailed. She said this, we discussed this, all of this, right? And they would read them back, and you can amend it as needed and go, oh, no, let's word it this way or whatever. I mean, there was a lot of emphasis put on the meeting minutes. So we get to El Campo, and I had the transfer ARD, and of course I was just so, with the moving and just trying to get him situated, and change isn't easy for a kid on the spectrum, and you just all this stuff. I didn't even realize at that ARD that they didn't read meeting minutes. And it was just the transfer ARD, but even still, then we went and did the 30-day ARD, and there still weren't meeting minutes like actually read at the meeting. And I was actually going to do a training, a parent training, and I was talking about the ARD process and stuff, and I got to the part about meeting minutes, and I had like a flashback to our ARD, and I went, wait a minute, we didn't have meeting minutes read at the meeting. What is going on here in this school district? It just went right over my head. I didn't even realize it. So, because there was no problem or anything, but that's part of the procedure. And so I went to the diagnostician. I called her and I said, hey, what's the deal? You know, I'm new here. I don't know how y'all do things, but you know, what's going on? And she said, yeah, that's kind of a point of contention in this district and this co-op, and we're just expected as the diagnostician to do all of it, to do the paperwork, to do the minutes, to do, you know, all of it. And I was like, well, what does the administrator do? Well, they just show up and just sit there. They're not contributing. I was like, that's interesting. So I had a conversation with the special ed director, and I said, just want to mention, you know, that y'all are setting yourself up for some trouble somewhere down the line, I think, because you're not taking those meeting minutes. And he's frustrated too because they can't get the administrators to do it. I was like, So when we got to, it was going to be John's annual ARD, and we were coming up to preparing for that ARD, and I was doing my homework and everything. Got the ARD notice, and I just sent her an email, and I said, I don't want to stir up trouble, because I really don't. but I need to have detailed meeting minutes at John's Art. I said, now however you want to do it, if you want the DIAG to do it and somebody else run the meeting, I said, I don't care how you do it, but I need detailed meeting minutes. And so they worked it out. It, you know, it caused a big stir because has anybody said anything about this ever to them? No. And so they did, you know, I think what happened was the DIAG did it, the administrator ran the art, which was really hilarious because they don't know anything about the order of the art. He's like reading the agenda. Okay, now we're going to talk about blah, blah, blah. We're all like, oh, whatever, dude. So those were the most detailed meeting minutes ever. It took her 5 minutes to read the meeting minutes. They were that detailed. And so it was really good from all the way through middle school. They knew. And it was good, too, because they started doing that for all their arts. Not just my son, but all of them. Because they realized that that's important. Again, power of the parent, right? So I get to high school, and we had to have a short art to drop speech services. And after that art, again, I realized we didn't read meeting minutes. Well, we're at a new school with the new DIAG with the high school. So I just called her and I said, I just want to let you know, I'm just giving you a heads up that when we get to that annual art, I'm going to need detailed meeting minutes. Oh, okay, I didn't realize, you know, and she's all, I said, it's not a big deal right now. For that other art, no big deal. But annual art, it's really important. We need to have those. So meeting minutes are important. If there is a discrepancy, the parent does have, according to the procedural safeguards, where's my procedural safeguards right here? Part of this is right to review records, which would include the art document, and right to amend it. And so you can actually put your own documentation and ask them to submit it and include it with that art document. So if it doesn't match up, I would think that that would be the way to get that amended so that that's in there. Does that make sense? Okay. So meeting minutes are important.
And when are they supposed to supply you with the minutes?
Well, the law says within a reasonable amount of time, and the state of Texas says reasonable is 5 days. So, you know, some districts are adamant, Katie was adamant that you didn't walk out of that meeting without your copy. I mean, they were, you know, they've been through lots of litigation, big school districts have.
Right.
So, you know, it's different in my small school district. I'll get it in the mail in about 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's fine.
You know.
You print mine off right then.
Do it.
That's what they should do, but that's not what always happens. So then step 8 is the closing remarks and the signatures. Did all the parties agree? Like I said, there's some changes in the new commissioner's rules, and we'll learn more about that. Hopefully by the day 2 webinar, I'll have more information on that, or I can include it in an email. So what I want to say about this, about agreeing and disagreeing, is when you're preparing for the ARD ahead of time, you have your list of your concerns and things that you want to talk about, things that you want to make sure are covered, things that are a concern for you as a parent. You have to think through that and think, what are my non-negotiables? What am I not going to bend on? Because the whole process can be a give and take thing, right? They're going to give they're going to give a little, we're going to give a little, we're going to compromise on some things. But there are some things that are non-negotiable. And I call that my line in the sand, right? I'm going to draw that line in the sand, and we're going to walk up to that line, but that's non-negotiable. The agreement is you agree with all of it or none of it, really. So if you get to a part in the ARD where you're in disagreement over something and cannot get past that disagreement, there's no point in continuing if you know that you're going to end in disagreement and go to non-consensus. Just say, you know, we're going to have a recess and go away and come back and try and resolve this. after. The way it's set up, we don't agree with parts of it and not parts of it. It's you are agreeing to it or not agreeing to the whole thing. So the procedure is if you disagree, as it is right now, but now with the new commissioner's rules, it's different. If you disagree at the ARD, then it's a 10-day recess. Apparently now it's 10 days or whatever you and the school mutually decide on as being a recess period. The point of the recess is supposed to be for the parties to go away, gather more information, gather more data or whatever, and come back and try to reach consensus. It's not to go away, it's not for the school or you to go away and go, well, we can have a 10-day recess because that's the procedure, but we're still not going to agree after 10 days. So you come back to ARD after those 10 days or whatever that date is, and you try to reach consensus again. You might not have to go back through the whole entire ARD, you're just going to go back to that point and reconvene. It's basically tabling the ARD. So what happens after that? What if you disagree still and cannot reach consensus after that recess ARD? Well, then you get to follow your procedural safeguards in the dispute resolution that's outlined. So the school is still going to do their program. Even if you disagree that second time, they are still going to implement the program that they feel is appropriate for the student. Does that mean that we don't have any power as a parent? No, because we do have other dispute resolution solutions that we can follow. So, disagree at the ARD, 10-day recess. If you still disagree, they're going to implement what they feel is necessary to implement. Because way back when we had initial ARD, we gave them permission to provide services to our child. We gave them consent. And so until that child is no longer in school, they graduate or age out or are no longer qualified, right, dismissed, the school is obligated to provide that education. They're going to do it with or without you. They're still going to do it unless you revoke consent altogether. So then what are our options? Written complaint, mediation, due process. Due process really is a last resort because that is lawyers, that is money, that is parents only win about 10% of the time of due process hearings in this state. Written complaint. Parents win written complaints about 90% of the time because a lot of times when you do a written complaint, you have to have that written documentation. It's all in writing. And so that's why when we get our prior written notice, when we get our paper trail of emails and notes and all of those things, every now and then the school district will do something crazy like actually put something in the ARD minutes that is against the law. And that makes it easy because you just send that to TPA and they're like, what, really? Do they not have training on this? And so then the written complaint process is very good for parents and it brings attention to what's going on in that school district because there's like 2,000 school districts in Texas. And TEA has oversight, but they don't know what's going on in every single one of those schools unless we let them know. Mediation is a process where TEA will bring in an impartial mediator and you try to go back and forth and reach consensus that way. I've been to 2 mediations with parents now and it was very interesting, but there is a lot of give and take in that mediation. It took all day long. You tie up school personnel all day long because it's a back and forth, back and forth. Well, we'll give you this, or we'll do this, or we'll give that, and to try and reach a consensus. And so that's our options. for that. Do I have to sign the paperwork? You know, that's a common question. Do I have to sign that or paperwork? Apparently that's changing now also, but if you have an open running conflict with the school, then don't sign it. The school is still going to implement their IEP, whether you sign it or not, because we already discussed that they can have an ARD without a parent if they have made all reasonable attempts to get the parent there. And if a parent refuses to go, they're still going to implement their program. So whether you sign it or not, they're still going to implement their program. They want you to be in consensus with them. They want you to work with them. There's this thing called the 5-day waiver to start the services that they'll ask you to waive. Because otherwise they have to wait 5 days after the ARD to implement what's in the ARD, unless you sign that waiver. And that was new a couple years ago, which I'm sure came out of some due process litigation somewhere. And when should I get my paperwork? Reasonable amount of time is 5 days, according to the law, according to the state. So it's up for debate on whether we get it, right? So that is the steps of the ARD process. Y'all feel comfortable with that? Did you learn anything new from going through that, or maybe something you didn't realize or didn't really understand why you do things in that order, hopefully? So this is the ARD agenda, basically. The ARD, this is the ARD structure, and it does not vary. The structure of the ARD is set up by IDEA. The content will vary. My ARD document does not look like her son's, does not look like your son's, should not look the same as every other child. It's interesting when sometimes schools make honest mistakes, but there's some cutting and pasting that goes on sometimes, and you end up with somebody else's name in your ARD paperwork. That's not
Heather,
cool.
remember yours? You've had it a couple times.
You're like, how is this individualized when it has Stan in there instead of John? So, yeah, but it happens. That's when we have to decide, are we going to give them a little leeway, or how are we going on this? Okay, so let me see where we are. Okay, so 45 minutes, I'm going to...
Brenda, can I ask you something too, since our schedule got mixed up? So I told you I had to go pick my kids up, right?
Yes.
And I was going to come back. But y'all are going to be gone before I come back. So where can I get this video camera from you? Are you going to be at your hotel?
Hotel.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll come by and see you then.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, you have my number, right?
Give it to me again right now.
979
9.
616. Here's on my card.
9.
0393.
Okay, awesome.
Okay. So let's talk about leadership now. This is fun. This is the fun part. We got all that procedural stuff out of the way. Tell me your definition of what leadership is. What do you think leadership means? In the context of anything, just leadership in general.
Guiding, mentoring.
Okay, guiding, mentoring,
Empowering.
what?
Empowering.
Oh, empowering.
I like that.
Good. What else?
Inspiring.
Guiding, mentoring, inspiring. What's the other one somebody mentioned? Empowering. Good. Leadership. Okay. Yes, it's all of those things. We're going to talk about what leadership is, the differences between assertiveness and aggressiveness, communication style, and body language and outcomes. We're going to go quickly because we got a lot to cover. Why is leadership important? All changes begin with one voice. Remember we talked about way back at the beginning of this morning about how we all enjoy the benefits of IDEA because parents who were leaders went before us to pave the way for our kids when there was no right to go to school and get any kind of services. And it has evolved and it continues to evolve and get tweaked and whatever. But it started with those voices saying, no, we're not going to stand for that. Knowledge alone is not enough. What do we do with the knowledge? You know, I had a parent leader actually that she did the first training I did in September in Houston, no, October. And she sent me an email yesterday. She said, thank you for the webinar, and she was on there, and thank you for all this information and the newsletter and all this, but I want to put action to what I'm learning. I'm like, man, I need to get her with Team Project and get her, because she is ready to go and do and empower and lead other parents. And that's what it is. So she even said, all this knowledge is great, but I want to put it into action. Provides an example and a vision for others to follow and will result in positive change. Again, we have previous parents to thank. It's not a perfect system by any means, but it's a whole lot better than it was in the 70s, which was non-existent. The pessimist complains about the wind, the optimist expects it to change, and the leader adjusts the sails. I like that. Leadership is standing up and having something to say. Understanding the big picture. Having something to say, let me back up a minute. Having something to say has to do with having an educated argument, I think. So, you know, if we have something to say, can we put knowledge behind it to change things? In the context of parent leadership and what we're trying to do with guiding parents in the ARD process, we are going to have to help that parent understand the big picture. What is their end goal what is the end goal for that child? And then what do we do to accomplish that? What are the steps that need to take? Starting with the end in mind. Leadership is knowing who you are and where you are going. Knowing your strengths and how to use them to lead. And we're going to look at, that's why we're going to look at communication styles and personalities in a few minutes. Conviction and belief in a cause has a large impact on your success as a leader. Are you fired up about something and you find out that other people are also fired up about it? That fuels that, right? That's how these movements work. We have to remember, though, in the convictions and beliefs, when we're interacting with another parent, okay, like back to the comment earlier about, you know, what about those parents that just want it all done for them? Well, we all in here have the convictions and beliefs that, you know, we are the driving force for our children, and we want all parents to be that, but they're not, unfortunately. We're going to run across parents that aren't. So we have to keep that in mind. But we're going to help them hone it down and hopefully get that big picture for their child and learn how to get them there, hopefully. Are they all going to do that? No, probably not. But as a parent leader going with another parent, we have to keep in mind that that's not our child in that meeting that we're talking about, in that meeting. So to provide that support, maybe gently nudge in the right direction, but keeping in mind that that parent still is going to be the expert on their child, right? So that's why we're not advocates. The leader can envision results, develop a plan, use a effective forms of communication, maintain a sense of responsibility, and have a positive outlook. That goes back to that big picture again, envisioning the results. What is the result that we want to get? Leadership takes planning. So not all of us are designed to be planners. So we can put tools in place to help us with that. You do not lead by hitting people over the head. That's assault, not leadership. Eisenhower said that. Huh?
I like
There you go. But if we need to, we can still hit them over the head, right? Communication, let's talk about that. Learning to be a leader is not complete without learning the different styles and personalities of communication and how it can benefit you as a leader. Leadership training will define some of these basic concepts and skills needed to enhance your effectiveness as a communicator. You know, we're not all natural born communicators, maybe. We all have different communication styles, different learning styles. We're going to talk about this because it's very interesting when you learn what those different styles are and realize that everybody that comes to that ARD meeting, you're not all going to communicate the same way, right? And so learning to recognize how somebody else communicates can help us in that communication. Adults aren't any different than kids. I mean, we're just big kids, right? So learning those different styles and personalities and understanding them even a little bit, can help us in that communication and interaction in that art process. So the 5-factor model, this is the one that is pretty well a worldwide kind of thing. There's all different kinds of personality tests and profiles. There's the true colors, and I don't know, years ago it used to be melancholy and sanguine, all that stuff. So there's all different kinds of personality profiles and things. The people that developed this decided to use the 5-factor model. And I wasn't really very familiar with the 5-factor model until I started doing this training, and so I did some research on it and found out about it. And did anybody, when you got my email, did anybody get to go on and do the little personality quiz? So what did you find out about yourself?
My highest score was in agreeable and openness. And I'm not sure why that percentage is like that. Like, it says you're 45% of the people. Is that answer right? For that? But this doesn't add up to 100, so I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how it breaks it down, but this is kind of an explanation of the 5-factor model and the different, because if we were just to sit there and do a little checklist, like mine came out high on agreeableness, and I went, well, that's not me. I'm not agreeable. What does that mean? But then when you read it,
I didn't really think because most of mine were the same, that I had one really high.
What was yours real high?
And everything else is like the same.
wow.
I guess it's like.
Okay, so openness is you're an open-minded person
Typical organized.
Mine is really low.
Basis setbacks.
in some regard.
Highly organized. No, that's OCD. It was not a diagnostic test.
So what did we end up with? Who did it and ended up with a score? So yours was openness
Yeah, the
and
high
agreeableness were high. Well, an extroversion was kind of high too,
Yeah.
right? Oh, but if you look at those, yeah.
Wait a minute, which one's mine? This is mine.
And then, so what else did we have around the table? What was yours,
I had
openness?
only openness, everything else was like weird.
Okay, what else?
Mine was conscientious, was my highest, and openness was the second one.
Conscientious and openness. Do you notice openness is kind of around the table? What else? Anybody else get to do it?
Openness was my lowest.
That was your lowest?
No, I changed that. No, I changed that, moral was my lowest, but no, openness was.
What was your highest?
Conscientious.
Okay, so conscientious and openness is pretty much a consensus around the table of those of us that did it. What did you get? She don't want to admit it. Neuroticism?
That's the lowest, so.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Okay. Maybe the highest. My
Extroversion
highest
was my
was
lowest.
conscious. No, agreeableness, just 4.3,
Oh, mine's 3.7.
so.
Agreeableness is yours?
Like to try and please other people as well.
I don't care about that.
I don't care about that.
And I don't care if other people like me too.
Yeah.
Emotional stability.
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're unbalanced
To
necessarily.
experience a negative emotion.
If you didn't get a chance to do it, if you got my email or if you didn't get it, just look in your spam because it's probably there. There was a link to go on and do a little test.
Well, it was my lowest score, but does that mean it was the highest value? Like,
No.
Okay, so how does that work?
This one would be your highest.
Right, and the neurosis, I got like a 2.2, but when reading this explanation, it says a person who is high in emotional stability. So according to my score, am I high or low?
Low,
Okay.
yeah, I think so.
I'm unstable.
So if the score is like 2.9, it means you're on the crazy side?
I'm unstable.
No, it's like a 4.
Mine's a
Yeah,
1.5.
So is it opposite? Does it mean
I
you're
think,
higher
I
or
think,
lower?
I think that means
Is
the,
it opposite?
yeah.
It makes sense for it to be
If it's
higher.
higher.
Emotional stability involves a person's ability to remain stable and balanced. A person
Oh,
who
it's
is
not one of the
high
five.
is even-tempered, calm, and somewhat resistant to stress. A person who is low tends to be moody, depressed, and very susceptible to stress.
Oh, wait, hold on. So
So
then
then
you're
does
opposite.
that mean that my
Because it
score
says
is?
scores range from a low of 1 to a high of 5.
I was confused.
Well, I
Does my low score mean that I'm very stable, or does my low score mean that I'm unstable?
2.
well, I can be moody depending on what it is.
Yeah.
But it's not usually outside stuff that's stupid.
I was tired when
Yeah.
I took this test.
I didn't like the
Overall.
test. Okay. I didn't like that personal test.
No, but
Okay, well, look at the little chart